Hi everyone, I'm Carly of Gnarly Carly Gaming, and today's video will be part 2 of my trip to San Antonio and all of the games we played while I went to see my friend Mackenzie for her birthday. So after Cooper Island, we were incredibly pooped. I was very smitten with the game and knew that it was probably one that I wanted to get to the table again while I was there, because I just, you know when you like initially inhale a Euro game and you're like, I want to do this again. But we were going to give it a break, and I knew in the morning that we wanted to tackle Kanban EV, which is one of the Lacerda games. Lacerda is notorious for his massive and heavy Euro games. And Kanban was one that I had played before, and they knew I could teach them. And so we set aside, we said, in the morning, that is what we will do. And so we crashed, and in the morning we woke up, and Mackenzie and I did a coffee game before Kanban. So I'll get to Kanban. But that was the plan. And to prep for Kanban, we played Calico. Calico, I am just going to show you because I feel like it is a game that is exactly as it looks. This is a quilt and cat game where you're basically drafting tiles to basically build out a quilt. Patches of the same color will get you buttons of that color. That's extra points. Patches of certain patterns will attract certain cats to snuggle on them. Cats are worth a different number of points. You try to maximize your points. You always have 2 tiles in your hand, and you can play one and then take a new one from a set of 3 every turn. That's the entire game. Super simple, great to play with your mom or friends who like little puzzly things. But it's also a little brutal because you're trying to maintain patterns to get extra points within your board. And as time wears on, you just kind of lock yourself into certain needs that you just might not see when the market's so small. And so it can really demoralize you. I kicked butt this time. It's one that's in my own collection, as you can see, and it's consistently good. It's one of those games that I'd say, if you like the theme of quilt and cats or know someone who will like it and who might play with you, then it's a worthwhile one to have. It's one of those little short 30-minute games that can be great to finish off a night in a very sweet way, or to start a big, heavy game day in an easy way. It's not going to completely blow your mind, but it is just kind of light and lovely. That's Calico. That's what we started with. Yeah, I kicked butt. I nearly had a perfect board. And Mackenzie took 1 tile, and we realized at the end that would have done it. And it didn't help her enough to justify it, but whatever. I love her very much. So we played Calico. That was all wonderful. And then we sat down to teach and play Kanban EV, and I fell in love with it, and they fell in love with it too. I don't know, Lacerda games scare people. He does make these big Euro games, but a lot of them are really rich in theme, and that can carry a lot of weight in helping teach you. Granted, I wouldn't want to learn that one by myself. All of them are easier if you have someone who's played before who can kind of guide the process, but it was really wonderful. Kanban EV is all about car manufacturing and efficient production, and you handle everything from design to acquiring parts to pushing cars out, and really you just want to be the best dang factory worker there is. There'll be stand-up meetings that will happen intermittently that basically give you a chance to assert all of the wonderful things you've done, speaking to different objectives. There'll be some shared ones as well as some in your hand. You'll have to acquire little speech tokens to be able to speak to them, but that's a big part of it. And the other part of it is the manager, Sandra, who's basically chasing you and going down the worker placement line, checking on different departments, and will scold you and penalize you with lots of negative points if you're not keeping up to snuff in those departments. But what's really cool about the game is all of us are working everywhere, and you're trying to best certify yourself so Sandra's not down your throat on all the different places, but you're also trying to acquire different things. And so there's different objectives, like I said, for those speeches that you'll be trying to like push towards, whether that's acquiring like a red car to be built or acquiring specific designs. And what I think is so cool about this game is that you're playing to every department. You're trying to best certify yourself to keep Sandra off your back, as well as to build up this manufacturing and keep it all running. But the things you create could also be utilized by other people potentially. So you have to be careful in the flow of actions and how you pick them and when to best optimize your own potential to score while also evading other potentials to see deficits. And I just think it's so thematic that it carries itself really well. Like, yes, there's a lot of things going on, but they all move so naturally together that after one play, you can pretty much like sit comfortably and flow through it. I think it's a brilliant design. It's actually one I've only ever played online before playing with Mackenzie and Sebastian, and now I want my own too, because I really fell just absolutely head over heels for it. It's just a gorgeous game too. The production is wildly wonderful for most Eagle Gryphon games, but this one is just, it's beautiful. And I'm not into cars. It's not a theme that like drives me. I don't even know what I was trying to say. I was gonna say grinds my gears, but that is not the expression. In fact, I would love to not have a car myself if I could. I actively loathe cars, but I think this is a wonderful, wonderful game. Despite the theme makes me love it. And so that was one of the big highlights of my trip, I would say, is Kanban EV. But despite our love for the game, we definitely needed a break post-Kanban. And so Sebastian stayed and hung with their girls while Mackenzie and I went out in San Antonio. We were determined to see more of the city, do the river walk, all of that while I was there. It was beautiful, but it was also freezing. I came to Texas during their winter storm, and we were not dressed for it. We were like, it'll be lightly cold. We'll put on like a jacket. We were like bundled together, holding each other through this river walk. And then till we sat down and we had like wine, and I think I had pizza and she had a meatball and some of the pizza too. And we just sat together and had like a lovely night, just kind of like catching up us two. And then we bundled each other up and like ran our way back to the car and then made it home. And we were like, we are satisfied with having done something in the city. And I'm sure I'll see more of it when I go back another time where it's hopefully less cold and horrific, but it also kind of was the perfect break we needed to go out and about, just us two, and then settle in right back for the night. We finished the games of the day with 2 extra games. We played Hickory, Dickory, and Habitats. Hickory Dickory is by Plaid Games, and it's another worker placement game. I'm not sure if you're sensing a theme, but we like workers and tiles and all of those good things. But in Hickory Dickory, you actually have mice that are going around a clock, and every round the hour hand will kind of tick on, and they can hop on and off this clock to do different actions, which is a really novel mechanic in worker placement. I think we were all kind of really enchanted by it. Sebastian and Mackenzie actually demoed the game at PAX Unplugged, so they even had more of a sense that they'd like it. I was basically just asked by Plaid Hat Games if I wanted it, and I was like, yes, please, that sounds lovely. I'm a mom of rats, and I love worker placement, and I was just really smitten by that mechanic of hopping off and on. And it is a much more tight game than I thought. It's fairly light to learn. There's only 12 different action spaces, and they're fairly simple. Some things let you acquire stuff, some things let you move around, some things let you score things. By turning in tiles, you can score them. And everyone has their own little board that incentivizes you to go for different tiles, but there's side objectives too. But what was really interesting is as mice hop on and off the clock, there's only so much space on the clock hand, and there's different mice that are different sizes. So your mouse that can hold the most stuff is really big. And my big old chonky mouse kept getting pushed off the clock, which will force you to do an action you might not want to do. For me, I wanted to score all the things that that big mouse was holding, but I couldn't get to the scoring space because I kept getting booted off. So it was actually a bit more brutal than I thought of the family game. But really charming and delightful. We only played it once through, so I don't feel like I have a full sense of it all, but I think it is not just a gimmick for sure. It has its own lovely appeal to it. I don't think I need every game to have that, but I think it was a really interesting way that worker placement can shift and correspond with time. And different mice have different abilities. Some can jump ahead to help you out in that department. And I just thought it was a really cute and lovely game. The second one we played to finish the night was Habitats, which was actually another one that they acquired at PAX Unplugged, and they actually sent home with me at PAX Unplugged. And this is another tile drafting game, and you're building up essentially a preserve, and there's different round bonuses to go for, whether that's a preserve that's really long or with the shortest distance from your exit, or one tile fully surrounded, things like that, that will give you little boosts. But essentially you're placing animals, and they all have different types of terrain that they want to be connected to really thrive. And so every animal has a terrain type that they're on and terrain types that they want in order to score points. And so you're trying to maximize how they're all positioned to best score all of the points. But what's really charming, and maybe I'll just grab it really quickly to show you because I have it it is. 1 second. Okay, so look at this pretty box. So as an add-on, you can get all of, oh my gosh, all of these animals. And this is, I don't know why I did this because this is terrible to show you all. But I'll just show you some of them. Let me find one. This is a little hippo, little purple hippo body. Very cute. But essentially when you score it, they're all unique animals on all of these tiles. When you score that animal, you can put the animal on it instead of a check mark to mark you scored it. And then when you start to look around at everyone's like filled preserves with all these animals actually popping up once they're satisfied is really, really charming and beautiful. It doesn't make it necessarily what makes the game, but it's a really small way in which the game just kind of blooms on the table. It's also just kind of lovely because I get very attached to how my preserve looks and the animals and the colors that I want to have. And that doesn't score you any sort of points, but it's charming, really super charming. And so if you're still with me, we have reached the end of day number 4. So far we have played 15 games and we are a wee bit tired, but we still have a lot more we want to do. So we crash and we wake up the next day to play a whole nother day, the last big day of games. As typical, we start the day with coffee and something small. We played this game called Piepmatz, and it's essentially a little bird game that Sebastian and Mackenzie taught me I hadn't played before, where essentially you're trying to acquire eggs and squirrels and crows can mess with you. So you're trying to like best the next bird in the bird feeder, or else you'll acquire them, and it's nice to get couples of birds. And I don't know if I can fully explain it. It's a little card game where you're playing birds and their number matters and adds to other birds so that someone's at the top of the bird feeder, and that determines which egg you get and if bad things happen to you. And that's really the whole game. And there is a nice coupling component where you got a lot of points if you have birds of the same type and number together with their male and female counterpart. And Sebastian was way too good at that. So we all scored well, but Sebastian insanely well. He just was a bird matchmaker, essentially. And so that was light and fine. I don't think it's a game that I would pick up, nor do I feel attached to. It's kind of like one of those anytime card games that you can throw in your pack, but there's probably a dozen other ones that I'd just say, hey, pick whatever theme appeals to you. It's fine. It was fine. I would play it again. I'm not horrified by it, but I'm not in love with it either. But we played that as a warm-up because we were about to hop into another one that we had planned to play before the whole trip started. And this one was Twilight Inscription. And Mackenzie is a big roll and write person. I am absolutely not. I don't deem myself to be an expert on roll and writes. I usually say that if I was trapped alone in my car, that I would play a roll and write game, because that could pass the time okay. Because a lot of times I see them as solo games. You usually are rolling dice and assigning them to kind of build up a little engine on your pad. So maybe you're building up like this little wheelhouse if you assign a thing here, and then you get to check off a bonus that gives you a bonus over here, and you're just trying to optimize your own little board. But the reason I don't love them is I feel like I'm like this the whole time. I'm constantly looking down at my board. Even if I'm drafting from a shared pool, there really isn't a sense of player interaction. And so, of course, Mackenzie very much wanted to try Twilight Inscription, which is based off Twilight Imperium, a notorious game that lasts 8 to 12 hours, which I do love. It's actually right above me, which you can't see. And I've actually played twice in the past couple months. Absolutely adore it. Incredible game. And this was the roll and write based on it. And I am always here for the bits. So even though I am not a roll and write person, I absolutely wanted to try Twilight Inscription at some point, and what better point than someone who's a dear friend for their birthday trip with their copy that I do not have to buy. And so I did it. And I will say it was better than most roll and writes that I've played, mostly because there was more depth there. There was also more length. It ran about 2 hours for us. But you have to pick a board that you're assigning things to first, and the theming is loosely related to Twilight Imperium, which was a joy for me. And at different intervals in the game, you both had war, which made you battle your neighbors, which added a higher level of player interaction, as well as you had things that we were voting on, which would kind of boost or hurt people on their boards. And that kind of forced you to look up intermittently. I don't think there was enough of a reason. I still think I spent most of the game looking down at my own board. I basically, at the end of the game, felt like I was crawling out of my own little puzzly hole after 2 hours. So I don't think it changed my mind on the genre, but I would try it again, particularly at a higher player count, because it can play up to 8 people. And I think that would be very different, especially with the voting situation. It was cute. It didn't rock my socks, but I don't know if any roll and write ever could. But Twilight Imperium was our 17th unique game of the trip. And so after that, we still wanted some meaty games that we wanted to kind of dial back our brains a bit. And so we did a bit of a replay day. So we played Cooper Island and Encyclopedia again. And like I said before, I was ever the more smitten with Cooper, still wanted it. And Encyclopedia was continuing to grow and grow on me. Both of those are games that I was introduced to that I think will be joining my collection relatively shortly. They're ones that really lit a spark of joy in me, and I think would do so for people in my world here at home as well. The last game we played for day number 5 was Isle of Cats. It was kind of our unwind game after basically 3 2-hour games, 2-hour plus games. And so this was a little polyomino game, and what that means is it's just like, think of little Tetris-y tiles that you're trying to like interlock and weave together in the best possible way. And Isle of Cats is another cat game, and you're basically rescuing them from an island where they're going to be murdered. The theme's a little weird, but you're putting them on their boat, and so you have to have baskets and fish to attract the cats into your boat, and then you want a Tetris to fill your boat as optimally as possible. You'll lose points if you don't. Similarly to other games that we actually played this weekend, there's a draft of cards that both give you access to like first cats, extra baskets, but also special abilities and special kinds of cats that can fit a little better in your boat, but also extra ways to score points. Some of those are universal that will get added to everyone's ability to score, and some of them are private objectives that can give you extra bonuses. For instance, I got one that meant that there was 2 types of rooms I didn't have to fill, and I could get a lot of extra points for that. This was one that we had all played before. Really light, lovely, again, one of those like Calico that you can kind of just whip out at the end of the night and really enjoy. I would say there's a little more going on. There's just a lot more pieces going on. But I think it's just a smidge better than Calico too. So a worthwhile, puzzly one, and really easy to introduce to gamers and non-gamers is something kind of light and wonderful. There's also a family mode if you want an even easier version of it. That is inherently a part of it. I think it's a great little game, and we were all just kind of happy filling our boats and doing that towards the end of the night. They also had a Beasts and Kittens expansion that was really cute that had kittens involved, and I was just livid because I was never able to get kittens that I really wanted. Like, absolutely my only objective was to get kittens playing that for the first time, and I got none. So that was a big sad, still a really lovely game though. So that was the end of day number 5, and I was already really emotional. But then we were heading into day 6, which was basically only a couple hours of a day because I was leaving that day. It ended up being a smidge longer than we thought it was going to be, only because my flight got canceled and I had to rebook for one that was slightly later. But we basically had the morning, and then in the like early afternoon, I had to get to the airport. And so our coffee game of the morning was Sagrada for Mackenzie and me. Sagrada is basically a stained glass mosaic making game where you're drafting dice to fill in as panels in your stained glass. Everyone has a different pattern they have to subscribe to in terms of colors and numbers in specific spots. So you're kind of limited, and you're trying to like piece this together with dice that you're drafting each round. There's also bonuses for having certain patterns and of both numbers and colors on your board at the end. That'll be like shared initiatives, as well as tools to manipulate your dice so that you can move them around or change them to help you not have your whole thing fall apart. Because if you have holes at the end, it's negative points. And it's just light and lovely. People compare it to Azul Calico level a lot. Azul is one of the big because it's drafting that they compare it to. Probably my favorite of all of those. And not just because I love Daryl Andrews, who made the game. He is one of the most phenomenal human beings. But the game itself is just, it's so charming. Like I just find it really, really charming and puzzly, but in a beautiful, beautiful way. So that was our simple start off. And then after that, we did our last bigger game, which is another one on our list that we wanted to get to. Not as big as some of them, but kind of why we chose it for the morning. Because we all were familiar enough with it to play. I had played before, and it was Terracotta Army was the last game that we played of the trip. This is by Board and Dice, and it is a really cool game where we're all building up basically a terracotta army together on the board. And you'll have some of them as yours, but you basically will score points for different round objectives, as well as at the end of the game for clusters of the same one, of type of statue, you will get points for basically if you have dominance, if you have the most in that little cluster of that type of statue, you get extra points. Just being there gives you points as well. So you're trying to cluster your things next to people, but all the different statues also have their own special abilities. And so you're using workers in order to obtain clay. Sometimes you need to wet your clay because you only can mold wet clay, as well as trigger special abilities and craft these statues. There's also specialty statues that will show up on the board to give different bonuses in different ways, such as breaking ties and things like that. And it was great. It was all 4 of us again. Allison was back over, and it was just what we finished off with. Mackenzie smoked us, which felt appropriate for her birthday trip. It was funny because there's such a high amount of endgame scoring, and we could all see that Mackenzie was going to absolutely kill us. But where the score was throughout the game, it didn't necessarily feel as brutal. So she was just slightly ahead. And so we started being like, hey, like, don't do that, it'll help Mackenzie. And she was like, no, like, don't be mean just because I'm in first place, it's artificial. We're like, it's not artificial, but she like couldn't see it. And at the end, she just decimated us, which is absolutely fine. It happens, but it was funny, just like her surprise at how well she did. And she did very, very well, and it was fitting. And then I was emotional the whole journey to the airport, and at the airport and the whole way home, and even now, because we don't have it on the books yet, but I want another trip. I want a trip to see all of them again, and then I want Mackenzie, Allison, and I to do like a girls gaming trip away. Maybe a cabin invites my other girlfriends who game here. And I'm just so thankful to have had this trip because I don't know. I feel like there's so much con FOMO that exists out there because there's so much to do and see at cons, and people play games at cons. And I know for a lot of folks, that's their time that they have to game. But for me at cons, I see demo games and there's so many people to see that my actual gameplay time or chance to play some of those heavier games is so limited. And so it was really special just to spend 5 days just being and gaming and eating and drinking and dancing and all of those wonderful things. And so I was Mackenzie's human birthday gift. They flew me out there to be with her for her birthday, but it was a really big gift to me too, because 22 games played over 5 days, 20 unique games. And yeah, it just made my heart so full, and I cannot wait till I see them all again. Anyways, that is all from me today. If you enjoyed the video and would consider liking or subscribing, it does help me a lot. I hate doing the like, please like or subscribe thing, but it does help a lot. And otherwise, I will see you guys for the next video. Take care.